Mr. Dorsey, in Wired magazine last week had an article that said that you'd admitted having to rethink fundamental aspects of Twitter. Would that be an accurate reflection of where you've been the last year?
Yes, we are rethinking the incentives that our service is giving to people.
And what would be the biggest area where you're trying to rethink how you thought this was going to work out and the way it's turned out to be?
Well, and this is pretty far-reaching, so we're still in the process of doing this work, but when we created the service 12 years ago, we had this concept of followers, and we made the number of followers big and bold in a very simple but noticeable font. And just that decision alone has incentivized people to want to grow that number, to increase that number. And the question we're now asking is that necessarily the right incentive? Is the number of followers you have really a proxy for how much you contribute to Twitter and to this digital public square? And we don't believe it is. But that's just one question. The way we lay out our buttons on the bottom of every tweet, in a reply, in a retweet, in a like, that also implies an incentive and a point of view that we're taking that we want to encourage people to do. So as we think about serving the public conversation, as we think about our singular priority of increasing the health of that public conversation, we are not going to be able to do long-term work unless we are looking at the incentives that our product is telling people to do every single day.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Senator Collins asked her last question. I didn't really quite get the answer to that question, but I think what she was asking is a question I had also, which was in the interest of transparency and public education and looking at things available to researchers and policymakers, are you willing to archive suspended accounts so that people can look back at those? And would that be a period of, I think 3 years was part of the question she asked? Give me a little better, more specific answer. You didn't have time to answer that, and I'd like you to have time to answer that.
We are looking at things like a transparency report. We put out a transparency report around terrorism, but we're looking at expanding that transparency report around suspensions of any account. We are still coming up with the details of what this will look like and what it will include.
As opposed to just a transparency report, are you willing to archive some of this where you may not be reporting on it at the time, but someone could look 3 years down the road and try to do an analysis of why that information was out there the way it was and how it fit into your overall policy of taking whatever action you're taking?
I think it's a great idea to show the historical public record. I just need to understand what the legal implications are, and we can get back to you on that.
Now, I may come back with a question if I have time on legal implications generally. I think for both of your companies who have been pretty forward-leaning in the last couple of months, as this conversation has moved pretty dramatically, the business implications, the liability implications of what we're asking you to do are pretty great. But let me see if I can get a couple of Facebook questions in first. Ms. Sandberg, does Facebook differentiate between foreign and domestic influence operations when deciding whether to take down a page or remove an account from the platform?
Our focus is on inauthenticity. So if something is inauthentic, whether it's trying to influence domestically or trying to influence on a foreign basis, and actually a lot more of the activity is domestic, we take it down.
You take it down indiscriminate whether it's a foreign influencer or a domestic influencer.
And you saw that with the IRA. With the IRA accounts, the original ones for our election were targeted at the United States, but then there were another 270 accounts that were almost all targeted in Russia or at Russian speakers in nearby languages. So a lot of those were domestic, and those are down.
Well, as been mentioned several times, and I think appropriately so, Google is not here today, but the two of you are, and Ms. Sandberg, again, just what seems like a long time ago, but only a few months since Mr. Zuckerberg was here testifying before Congress. Seems like to me that Facebook has been pretty active in finding and taking down things that should not have been out there. The recent Iranian takedown, the Russian things that have been taken down. You want to talk a little bit, what's the big challenge about being at the forefront of trying to figure this out from a business perspective or a liability perspective, either one? Then I'm going to come to Mr. Darcy with the same question.
Well, I really appreciate what you said, because we have been investing very heavily in people, in our systems, in decreasing the dissemination of fake news, in transparency, and I think that's what you're seeing pay off. I think we've all said, and in the private meetings we had, as well as this public discussion, that tighter coordination really helps us. If you look at our recent takedowns, some of it was information we found ourselves, some of it were hints we got from law enforcement, some of it are information we can share with other companies. And so this is a big threat, and our opponents are going to keep getting better, and we have to get better, and we have to stay ahead. And the more we can all work together, the better off we're going to be, and that's why I really appreciate the spirit with which this hearing this morning is taking place.
And how does the takedown practice work where legitimate accounts are sold then maybe and repurposed by others? How do you keep, what are you looking at there as a challenge?
So our policy is inauthenticity. If you are an inauthentic account, if you are pretending to be someone you're not, you come down. If you have touched the account of someone who is authentic, then we would leave the authentic account up. But in cases like I was answering with Senator Collins, if you are an authentic person who RSVP'd to an event that's not authentic, we would let you know.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Darcy, back to that other question. From a business and legal liability standpoint, what's the downside of being out there where you are now trying to every day implement policies that nobody's ever implemented before?
So I think there are a number of short-term risks, but we believe that the only way that we will grow and thrive as a company is by increasing the health of this digital public square that we're helping to build. We also benefit, as Cheryl mentioned, from tighter collaboration and tighter partnership. We've really strengthened our partnership with our government agencies since 2016. There are a few areas that we would need more strength. We would like a more regular cadence of meetings with our law enforcement partnerships. We would love to understand the secular trends that they are aware of and seeing in our peer companies or other mediums, or more broadly, that would inform us about how to act much faster. And we would appreciate, as much as we can, consolidating to a single point of contact so that we are not bouncing between multiple agencies to do our work. So that is what we found in attempting to do a lot of this new policy and work in terms of partnership, but ultimately it comes back to we need to build our technologies to recognize new patterns of behavior and new patterns of attack and understand what they actually mean, and then ideally get some help from our law enforcement partners to understand the intent and to understand the motivations behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I'm sure my time is up. Thank you, Chairman.